Over in Washington, Democrats, they're running out of time to meet their self-imposed deadline to pass President Biden's social safety net plan. They have yet to figure out a compromise to satisfy both moderates and progressives. There's a new CBS News poll out that shows that many Americans don't even know what's in the bill. So let's get straight to CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang, who's joining us now to talk more about the shrinking timeline. Weijia, good to see you. So according to the latest polling, most Americans have heard more about the cost of the Build Back Better agenda than the programs that are in it. So does the White House have a plan to build more public support?
So the poll was really interesting, Vlad and Anne-Marie, because it shows that only about 10% of Americans know the specifics about what's in the Build Back Better plan, and only 30% know what's in it at all. And you're right. Many more people are aware that, Democrats have been talking about spending $3.5 trillion to get it done, and now either trying to compromise to make it smaller. But what's interesting is that even though a lot of people don't know what's in it, overall, 54% of Americans say they still support it, and they, believe it should pass. So that is a good sign for the Biden administration. But I think what's confusing here is that this White House is so disciplined when it comes to messaging. And we have heard many, many times, I'm sure guests from the administration who have appeared with you guys, we certainly have heard it many times, all the things that are in the Build Back Better plan to make life easier and better for Americans so that they can work the jobs that the administration is trying to create with other plans. And so in terms of what more they can do, I think that the White House would argue that they've already been doing that, and that because of all the Democratic infighting in their own party, and because the number is frankly really important, that has sort of made a lot of noise. And perhaps that's why, the president has been traveling to directly sell the components of this package to people, and we expect that will continue to happen.
I guess I shouldn't be surprised that a lot of Americans don't know what's in the bill, because Democrats don't know what's going to be in it either. They're still debating what to spend what money on. Which brings me to this question. They're sort of dragging out this negotiations, trying to fine-tune this bill. How much time do Dems have, though, to salvage President Biden's agenda?
Well, Democratic leaders have set a self-imposed deadline of October 31st to pass not only this measure, but also a bipartisan infrastructure bill on roads, bridges, and tunnels that would create many more jobs, in their view, for people. So the thing is, Anne-Marie and Vlad, that they've already pushed this deadline. They were hoping to pass this at the end of September. And you'll remember House Speaker Nancy Pelosi decided not to take a vote on it after all because they didn't have the numbers. And so even though they have now extended that until Halloween, if they don't accomplish it by then, that doesn't mean that's it. That's their only chance. They could extend it again. And so, the president himself has said he doesn't care necessarily if it gets done in 6 days or 6 weeks. He just wants it to be done correctly. And so that's why, they are giving themselves more time. But at some point, it's going to become apparent where they simply cannot find compromise. And the White House is hoping it doesn't come to that, and they can figure out a way to pass at least most of the president's main ideas here and plans, while satisfying the moderates who are complaining that it's just too much money.
So the negotiations between the House and the Senate Democrats, Weijia, what's the progress looking like there?
Well, the good news is it looks like they have been able to reach a new frame for what number that they are willing to settle at. Remember, we just said it was $3.5 trillion, but now it looks like they're going to land closer to $1.9 to $2.2 trillion. Again, what they haven't figured out is what's going to stay and what's going to go, and how much money is going to go to each program. Because not only are we talking about the social safety net for people, like, more paid paid family leave or free universal pre-K for everybody. But a lot of the president's main climate change proposals are weaved into this as well. And as an example, Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia has said he's not sure that all of those belong in this particular package. So they just have to move some puzzle pieces around, but it is a lot of progress that they've been able to bring that initial figure down. And progressives would say that that would be a huge concession for them anyway, because they started at wanting $6 trillion for this plan. So now we're looking at somewhere around $2 trillion.
I want to ask you about something else. We know that there's a huge humanitarian crisis that is brewing in Afghanistan since the withdrawal of U.S. troops. The U.S. has withheld money from Afghanistan and is not recognizing the Taliban as an official government, like many, many other governments around the world. But a group of high-level U.S. delegates met with Taliban officials this weekend for the very first time since the Afghan military withdrawal. You know, what are you hearing about those talks, the purpose, and if anything sort of concrete came out of it? Because there are many civilians suffering.
Right, and that's exactly why this face-to-face meeting happened in a third country in Doha, Qatar, and both sides said that it was, a productive meeting, that they had very frank conversations, and that the U.S. made clear to the Taliban that they're going to be judged on their actions and not just the promises that they have made so far. There are still American citizens and green card holders in Afghanistan who are trying to leave, and the Taliban has committed to facilitating that process. They've also promised to change the way daily life is going to be for Afghan civilians. And it's just hard to tell how true that will be, given some of the behavior that we've already seen from Taliban officials. And so that's why it was so critical to sit down and sort of talk about where they are now, because as you mentioned, Anne-Marie, they want legitimacy. They want to be recognized as a government, and they want money to do that. But right now, their assets are frozen. And so the U.S. has made clear that in order to make any progress on what the Taliban wants, they have to prove themselves, and that's going to take time. But this was a very important first step to sort of make sure those talks are on track, that they've been having, behind the scenes, not face to face, to be able to have a conversation and set expectations. So at this point, it is just waiting to see whether the Taliban does what they say they will.
Well, the whole world is watching. Weijia, thank you so much.
Sure.